is a Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and this is Public Access Television, Ithaca, New York, in episode 219, April 10th, 2019. So this week we're going to, let's see, wait a minute. This is, want to see all my shows, you can go walkinthepark.tv and see all my episodes. This week we are going to do a, go take a look at movies that were taken in the parks. Still silent movies are taken by the Wharton Studios back 100 years ago in our parks. This was a program that was actually an adaptation of a program done last week at the Center for History and Culture, Tompkins Center for History and Culture, in cooperation with the Wharton Studio Museum Project with Diana Reisman, who is the director. And they're going to build a museum at the at Stewart Park, once called Renwick Park, in one of the old studio buildings from back in the old days. So let's get started. Let's take a look at it. Here is Stewart Park here from the air, and this aerial photograph by Bill Hecht. And you'll zoom down. That's, you can see Fall Creek on the bottom, Skew Creek on the left, and that is Stewart Park. And this is what it looked like back before it was Stewart Park, called Renwick Park, and there was a big pier there, a steamboat pier. And this is what it looks like today without the pier, of course. And this is what it looks like from the water today. And this is what it looked like from the water back in those days. This was actually before it was a movie studio. It was an amusement park, and there was a trolley that went there, and there was a tower. So let's take a look. This is called Renwick Park, Ithaca, New York. And there's a trolley line that came up to it. See if we can find that picture. We'll find it soon. Let's see. So I'm going to show a little movie here. See if this is it. Which one we gotta go here? Okay, now this is just a view from the water. Okay, I thought this might be where I started you a little film. So this is the zooming in. You see the tower there, and then in the middle here you can see now the park has a sign for the Wharton Studios. Now Wharton Brothers came here in the 19-teens, the early 19-teens, with another company called S&A from Chicago, and they fell in love with the place, and they decided to make a movie studio here in Ithaca, New York, and that's what they did. So we're gonna, let's see, here's some of the pictures of some of the actors we got here. Let's see, I'm gonna see if I missed a video that I was gonna show you here to start it right off. Maybe not. Okay. No, all right, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So these are just some of the actors that were there. I don't know all of whom they are. The Diana Reisman of the Wharton Studio Museum, or Terry Harbin, who gave me a lot of these pictures, who's Ithaca Made Movies, knows a lot of these actors that were in the scenes there. This is the interior of one of the studios they built. So they took over the park, they rented it, and they built studios there in the amusement park buildings. So let's get up to where we are here. So here we can, this is obviously out in the lake, and they used Cayuga Lake as well as the park itself, and they used all the parks in the area. Well, actually before they were parks. And here is one of their posters for the movies they made. Here's another poster. And here is a outdoor stage they built. This was on the set of a film called Wallingford Park. This also is a scene from one of their films, Wallingford Park. Let's see. Okay, well, I'm going to show you a video now of that introduces the whole thing. So let's go back to, so this scene here was actually from one of their films called the Patria film during World War I. But let's look at this introductory film made by it's made by Terry Harbin with music by David Jamarowski. So let's look at that.
It was 1912 when the wardens came to town to shoot a movie for Big Red. Filmed high above Cayuga's waters. They ended up staying here instead. And took over old Hemwick and they settled down and gave everyone in town a good part. Then they brought all the big stars here to Ithaca to give movie making here a start. That was Hollywood on Cayuga. Ithaca in its early teens. Oh, it was Hollywood on Cayuga, a time of making movie dreams. They turned Enfield into Alaska to make a film, The Great White Trail, a cliffhanger made for y'all at the edge of Lucifer Falls.
Okay, so that was just a clip from a longer piece that he did. But here's a poster. It starred Doris Kenyon, who was a big star at the time, done in 1917, released in 1917. Much of it shot at Lucifer Falls, and much of it shot at Enfield, or what's now Robert H. Truman State Park. Here's another picture of it. It's about the Gold Rush. So this is probably the most famous of their films because it still exists. Most of their films did not survive, but there are a few of them. And there are folks that are like Terry Harbin and others in the Wharton Studio Museum that are reviving them, and various people around the country. Here's the star, one of the stars, Doris Kenyon. Looks very young there. Another guy who was a local, F.W. Dick Stewart, Ithaca stockbroker turned actor, starring as the villain in The Great White Trail. So let's take a look at some of the sites that were used around here. A lot of people thought this was at Robert Truman State Park in Enfield, but actually it is not. It was at well, we'll get to it later. It was at Ludloville Park. But let's take a look at another video here. This is going to be some clips specifically about the use of the parks, about particularly those two. Get right to it here, coming right up. Okay, so those were just, that usually they would have music to that because it's a silent film. They would add music to it. So let's take a look at some of the sites that were in there. So this scene here, where you saw people walking out from behind the big icicles there at a waterfall, that was actually at Ludlowville Falls at Ludlowville Park in there's another picture from that same scene in Lansing yeah, little in the village of hamlet of Ludlowville in Lansing. So where is that? That's, well, if you go up Cayuga Lake on the east side, the point that's sticking out there, you can see Ludlowville Park. The point sticking out in the lake, that's Myers Point, and then the woods that go north straight up from there, that's Salmon Creek Valley, and right across the lake is Ganic and Ganic Falls State Park. Now we'll zoom right into Ludlowville Park, right in the little hamlet of Ludlowville. And that's Salmon Creek on the upper part there, and that white area is actually the Ludlowville Falls. And there they are pouring over this layer of limestone, and it's all eroded out. The shale underneath is eroded out below, so you can walk behind it as they did in this scene in the Great White Trail. So here's another scene at Ludlowville Falls. This is actually a camera crew picture of a camera crew set up there, and here's what it looks like today, that same spot, but there it was like 100 years ago. So the films were made from about well, off and on from 1912, 13. Their studio actually at Renwick Park, which became Stewart Park in 1921. Oh, it was about 1915 he was opened up, and they ran till about 1919, and then there was another company that came in 1920 and did some stuff. They went out of business. The World War I was hard on them, and then also the 1918 flu epidemic. A lot of people didn't want to go to the movies. A number of different factors that resulted in them not staying as they had intended to. So let's take a look at some of the other headlines from the area. There was a lot in the newspaper about the Wharton's films, and so here it is about Enfield. It was called Enfield Glen. Of course, this was back before it was a state park, because this was 1917, say, that the film was made, and the park wasn't created until 1920. At that time, 1917 or so, that is the time when Robert Treman and his wife Laura were actually purchasing the property and purchasing the gorge, and eventually did turn it into a park. So this scene here, I spent a while trying to figure out just where in the gorge this was, and finally I figured it out. So, but I didn't have a picture of this spot, a modern day picture, so Josh Teeter, who works in the job I used to work in years ago in environmental education at the Finger Lake State Parks office at Ganic, he also lives down near the park here. He went out and took this picture of the same spot that film was taken over 100 years ago. And this spot is, if you go into the beginning of the gorge, this is probably the most famous picture of Treman that you'll see. It's put in lots of different books and calendars and so forth. Of the little footbridge, it's at the end of the entrance gorge in the upper park. And you go onto that footbridge and you look to the left and you see that scene. And Josh actually went in there a couple of weeks ago and took this picture for me, because the gorge is not open yet. It's still closed for the winter. They have to do what's called scaling. In fact, this past week we've had a whole episode about scaling in the gorges, which is removing the winter loosened rock from the cliff over the trails. So you can't get in there until that's done and the trail is opened. So that's that same scene right there again. And this is a little closer in, zoom in the film of people going up and down the embankments there. And then to Lucifer Falls. They're on the top of the Lucifer Falls, the top of the picture, and they're also midway down. This is not all the way down the falls. So let's look at this winter picture from a few winters ago, and then compare it to this. A lot more ice on that older picture, maybe. Maybe not. Look at the top of that, the top of this. Let's go in, zoom in more now. So they were really on the this portion, the upper portion of Lucifer Falls. So if you look in the right-hand side where the trail curves around, and then let's see, you look up here, it's kind of the same spot. So yeah, zooming in more closely, and they were on that ledge right there. And there, so the way they are down the bottom was probably on that ledge there, I think. So anyway, it's interesting to see that the places have changed some geologically, but people were using them long before we were alive. So, and there they are down at the bottom of the falls, and of course that's an area they really don't want you to go in there now because it's not safe. People climb up the falls and such, which they shouldn't do. And then this is said to be. This scene in the film is said to be in Enfield, or what's now Robert Treman State Park, but I don't know exactly where it was. So while they were making the movie in Ithaca, they were waiting around for snow, and there wasn't enough snow, and so they went up to the Adirondacks and shot some of the scenes in the Adirondacks. And so here's a few scenes. This is one of the cameramen, several of the cameramen there. I've got names of all these guys, but and this is a scene in the film. Another scene is a building burning. This is all up in Saranac Lake area. So they're up in the Adirondack Park. And there's a scene, there's a woman with a gun up on a rock by a frozen lake. So, but they did go back to when they heard the snow had fallen in Ithaca, and they went back, and I guess they shot those scenes at Enfield, at Upper Gorge at what's now Robert Treman. But here's another film. I'm not exactly sure which this one was, I was told, but I don't remember. See if I have that somewhere here. I don't think so. Anyway, you look on the left, there's a woman there in the falls, and this is one of their films. And then this scene was taken from this vantage point, looking back from this bridge. That's first bridge in the entrance gorge up there, looking back at that entrance waterfall, little waterfall there. I think it was the same spot. So there we go. There and there. I think it's the same falls. So Enfield was used in more than one film. Here's another shot from some scene in a movie said to be at Enfield, and what's now Robert Treman. So there wasn't the only what's now a state park that was used for movies. Let's go down to Ganic Falls, and this shot from about 90 years ago, or actually I think it's probably around 1926 or so. But when they went there in the 19-teens, it was before the Teganic House Hotel burned down. That burned down in 1922. So the hotels were there. This was all private property. It was a private resort. You could take a train there. You could take a steamboat. And I guess at this point you can probably take a car. And some films were shot there. For instance, this one is this is a slide from Terry Harbin. Most of these are. Then Marguerite Clark, Out of the Drifts is the name of that. So let me see what I've got here. Any more information about that? I got to catch up with myself here in my notes. So Out of the Drifts was filmed there. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures. We don't have any actual films from Teganic, but there's descriptions of the films. For instance, in this Ithaca Journal article. Catching up here myself. So that one says... Here we go. The company has constructed a log cabin in the gorge below Ganic Falls to be used as headquarters for the winter scenes in that vicinity. Out of the Drift is the title of the play being produced. It is from a book of the same name by Paul Potter. The play is a love plot and deals with winter life in Switzerland. The background furnished by the deep gorge at Ganic Falls. So that's pretty cool. So that use that scenery. This is one of the guy named James Gordon, who is both a director and an actor, and one of his favorite locations. That's Ganic Falls in the back, and it's frozen. I am told that's what it is. Here's another newspaper article. Motor car goes over big gorge at Teganic. It's some 200 persons see thrilling scene, even if it was enacted for a film picture. S&A, for People's Great Stunt. S&A was a film company that preceded the Whartons, and actually the Whartons worked for them until they came. So this was pretty early. One man was killed, another seriously injured, and an automobile as completely demolished as possible shortly after 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon at Teganic Gorge, when this speed-crazed chauffeur ran his machine over the precipice and dropped it 200 feet into the edge of Teganic Creek. just above the falls. So they weren't actually killed. That was in this story, I believe. Here's another one. The exterior scenes of The Line Rider will be taken from, first, Mr. Wharton stated, covering a radius of 10 miles. Ganic Falls will probably play an important part in the exterior scenes. Okay, actors hang on the brink of death. Some daring stunts pulled off at Ganic in order to produce gypsy play. Ithaca boy makes good. So, so they were in the parks. They were at Ganic. They were on Cuga Lake at Renwick Park. They were at Enfield. But they were also, but the most accessible places, rugged scenery, which are now sort of parks, were the gorges right in Ithaca, like Fall Creek. So this one says Wharton Inc. took many chances in getting the best realistic scenes, film scenes, for their movies. This location is just another one of them. This is right above Ithaca Falls. I don't know if you can see that man above the cliff there. So they use Fall Creek Gorge quite a lot. And this is probably the most famous picture, certainly one of the most famous pictures from the Whartons. And this is from the Ithaca Journal article, August 1st, 2014. They wrote, Friday marked the 100th anniversary of a trolley being intentionally crashed into the Fall Creek Gorge by the Wharton brothers during the filming of their silent movie, The Prince of India. An article in the Ithaca Journal from Monday, August 3rd, 1914 tells that despite the Whartons' attempt to keep the numbers of spectators down, 1,000 people came out to watch the spectacle at Stewart Avenue Bridge. So they ran a rail car off the bridge, and that was quite a show. Here's a scene that's probably on Fall Creek Gorge, some kind of dramatic shooting scene. And let's see the next one here. This is the Romance of Elaine, which was a weekly serials, and that is Pearl White and Creighton Hale, the actors there. So Pearl White, Eric Creighton Hale, Doris Kenyon, Irene Castle. They were some of the famous actors of the time. So here he's getting his hat. This is right by Ithaca Falls. It's another scene. This is said to be in Cascadilla, but it kind of looks like Ithaca Falls to me. And that's Irene Castle right there. Irene Castle was a big deal back then. And she married Robert E. Treman, who was one of the two sons of Robert H. Treman, Robert Henry Treman. And Robert E. Treman married her, and then they got divorced a few years later. I guess I read that he stole her money and lost it on the stock market. But and Alan H. Treman was his brother, and he became active in the parks afterwards. Another scene at Ithaca Falls, at the Fall Creek Gorge near Ithaca Falls. Now this one is a movie called The Mysteries of Myra. And it's, let's see, yeah, Mysteries of Myra. And that's it. That's at Ludlowville again. We're back at Ludlowville. Here it is, 1916, inside the studio. Let's see what we've got next here going on here. Let's just oh, here we are. This is at Cascadilla, also Mysteries of Myra. Another scene from that one. Here is in, it says, Mysteries of Myra, 1960, Wharton Inc. filming location, Triphammer Falls, BB Lake at Cornell. So, yeah, all right. This one is another film called If Women Only Knew, also shot in Fall Creek. This is right below the suspension bridge, right near the suspension bridge. And we got a little clip from that I'll try to play here now. So let's bring that up from the If Women Only Knew in Fall Creek. Hope I got the right one here. Yeah, coming right up here. So that's all we got for that clip. We're running out of time here now, so uh, take a look at the whartonstudiomuseum.org, whartonstudiomuseum.org. See if we can bring up that slide again. Yeah, where do we go? Where's that going to be? Come on. And you can find out a lot more. And also go to Ithaca Made Movies. So thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you again soon. Is a